2, 1. Okay, and we are live. Exercises Medicine, episode number 6. We typically refer to the lost episode included within that.
Yes.
So, Nick, I'm sorry. I think that's going to be part of the history of this
podcast. It is, yes.
Moving forward. Our guest today is someone who originally interviewed me when I was a faculty member at Drexel University in fall of 2016. We started by having a cup of coffee and a cup of tea. I think I got tea from the random tea room around 4th Street for Roberta. And it was really like a 2-hour interview, and it was really, it sort of kind of got me thinking about long-term. Wow, like I really like that long-form discussion. So thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Roberta Perry is, you want to tell the audience who you are and your role within the college?
Sure. So I am the Associate Director of Content Strategy for the College of Nursing and Health Professions. And I've been at Drexel for 5 years, a little over 5 years, and I started as a communications manager, I think. So it's been really interesting. I really love what I do. I think the only thing I really miss from my last position is more interaction with students. Mm-hmm. But that's actually coming around a little bit. But it's just because it's so big, you don't run into students like in the hallway. So, but that's what I do. I work with everybody in the college to come up with content that we can use on our website as well as the all our social media platforms. So we're trying to increase engagement. Obviously we want to appeal to prospective students, but if you think about the range of students, we're like undergraduate all the way up to, people coming back, older adults and things like that. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of fun, but it's a lot of work to think about. We have one piece of content. How many ways can we chop it up, and where can we use it?
True.
Yeah.
I think you've been here a little longer than 5 years.
No.
I think this is year 6 because you were here when I came in 2016.
Well, okay, so I'm into my 6th year.
Into your 6th year. I was like 5 years. I think we're both in year 6. Did you come in 2016 as well?
I think so. Yeah.
Same year.
Yeah.
Good year.
A good year for Drexel.
Yeah.
So really what we were hoping that we could do, Roberta, today is, part of what the podcast is really about is really this is part of the American College of Sports Medicine's Exercises Medicine initiative. Mm-hmm. And what EIM is all about is providing information, resources, and really getting the word out about some of what the university offers to faculty, staff, students to live a more healthful and a physically active lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And really what Nick and I sort of think is starting to emerge through this from most of the guests we've talked to is really getting through the implementation barriers to starting. So the knowledge, the resources, Nick has done a very good job along with Talbot to come up with a video and give a tour of the DAC, video tour walking you through, like make sure you have your card, they won't let you in, these kinds of things to really break down the barriers and make it as simple and easy to follow as we do that. And so really I think it's also an opportunity to learn who the different people are, both in the college, in the different departments, mm-hmm. and across the university. And then learn about what everybody's exercise story is. And that's sort of how Nick and I got started with this whole pilot version of the podcast. Was we had Dr. Steve Vitti, who's a new faculty member here. He's one of my personal friends. And we really just started, it's easy to start providing context around your own story. And then we quickly realized that, well, everybody else's story is probably likely different in how they've sort of engaged with it. So what was your story with exercise? How'd you get involved with it?
Okay, so a little bit of history. I've been overweight since I was about 13 years old. Before that, I was just big. I was tall. Anyway, so I'm also one of 5 kids. I have 3 brothers and a sister, and all of my brothers are very athletic. They all played football, the whole thing. But I wasn't really much into athletics except for what happened at gym class. So, but we were, back then when I was growing up, you were very active. I mean, we would be at the shore every summer for almost the whole summer. And my grandmother, because we lived at her house, would get us up at like 8 o'clock, feed us, and tell us to get out and not come back until 5:30 when it's dinner time. So we were down at the beach. They would not take us anywhere, so we were on our bikes. So, we were active, but it wasn't like an exercise thing. Mm-hmm. So as I got older, exercise kind of wasn't a thing for me, but weight loss was always a thing for me. And it was really, it was something that drove me, but it wasn't something that clicked for me. Like I thought, it's all about what you put in your mouth and not as much about, how active you are. Mm-hmm. So fast forward, I started getting really interested in exercise at one of my weight loss periods. And I had a trainer that I went to see at the Y, and he was brutal. he was brutal. I remember back some of the things that he did, which was, one day we'd get in the pool and he's like, all right, we're going to just like tread water forever and mm-hmm. whatever. And then at one time I remember he had me put my legs over the side of the pool in the water, and he gave me a 10-pound plate and he made me do like sit-ups out of the water. I'm telling you, he was tough.
Intense. I'm scared.
Yes, he was something else. And then if I were like, back then I was still kind of partying a lot. And if I was late for an appointment or I didn't show up, he literally came to my house and he would wake me up and he'd be like, let's go.
Whoa.
So, and, I was very grateful because he did get me into exercise. And then I started teaching just kind of an aerobic type of class. Mm-hmm. And then, it kind of like went off a little bit and I got out of it. Then when I went to my second attempt at college, I ended up going to Boston, and it wasn't so much exercise, but everything is by foot up there. Like you go grocery shopping up there, it's no cars. Mm-hmm. So we did a lot of walking, and once I met my husband, we walked like all over Boston all the time. So that was kind of fun. My most recent thing, I actually really do enjoy exercise. I love to swim. And the first time I got in the pool to swim, I was still pretty overweight. And I was like, just get to the other side of the pool. Mm-hmm. Just however you do it, just do it.
Yeah.
So I got from that point to probably in about 3 months where I was able to swim for about 30 minutes nonstop.
Wow.
So it was like, it really was awesome. And it was like this jolt. And I was like, this is amazing. And I was going 3 mornings a week or something. So I really do enjoy it. So around 2010, I found this really great weight loss program that I was doing. And it was with a doctor. And he had 2 rules. Number 1, you weigh yourself every day. And number 2, I have to call him every day. So during that call, it was, what did you eat yesterday? What's your plan for today? And how are you feeling? Mm-hmm. So we would have conversations that lasted, 3 minutes, or we'd have conversations that lasted like an hour. So it was whatever. Mm-hmm. So I lost a lot of weight back then. It was about 80 pounds, and I had kept it off for a long time, the longest I'd ever kept weight off. Mm-hmm. And then in 2013, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. And when, I thought, great, you yank out somebody's thyroid, there goes the metabolism, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I had my thyroid removed in 2013. And between that time, I was working at a different college, and I have a friend who is a sports manager and agent. And he also happened to own a gym that was like more geared towards athletes.
Yeah.
And when I said to him, this is what I'm doing, and he's like, well, why didn't you tell me before your surgery? We would have gotten you in shape for that. And I was like, well, I didn't know about this before that. Mm-hmm. So I started going, and I said to him, I really don't have the money to have a trainer and be here. And he's like, who said anything about money? I was like, really? He's like, I'm going to set you up with a trainer, and you're good. So that was amazing. I loved it. She, again, was brutal. She was this like 6 foot something basketball player from Villanova. She had graduated. And the stuff, like the circuit stuff. And I just, I was telling this guy recently, so it would be like 15 minutes warm up, and then it would be like high intensity on like the elliptical or the bike.
Yeah.
Then run over to the mats, do the heavy ropes for about 2 minutes.
Oh.
Then do some planks, flip over with the ball up and down, bouncing. I mean, I'm telling you, I left there feeling like a wet blanket. It was crazy.
Yeah.
Did any of these, so twice, right? Where I took notes on this. So twice you had people that were, to a certain degree, I guess, responsible for helping you walk with you along your health and fitness goal, right? That was like their job, was to walk with you and make sure that you're doing that. And it's 2 different occasions. Once with this agent, right, where they provided you with a trainer, and then your first experience when you started working with a trainer at the YMCA. In both of those instances, tough love was sort of applied.
Yeah.
Do you think that worked for you?
I think it did. I think because sometimes you just get it in your head where it's not that much of a priority. Even if like when I was paying the first guy, it just it wasn't a huge priority. But then I saw how much time he was investing in me, so then I kind of thought, well, all right, I should probably think about this. But there's something about being able to, when you leave a workout and you feel like I can't even lift my arm to like put the key in the ignition, but I knew later after a shower and, maybe a meal, I knew I was going to feel amazing.
Yeah. Right. I just want to get you consistently showing up so that way when you get up in the morning, the barrier to come is gone.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I really look at it more like habit formation, but structure.
Yes.
And there's multiple facets. I want to make sure we're not moving around too quickly. But a couple things that Roberta brought up in her story that I really like is, one was, I think the importance of having an accountability partner.
Yes.
Regardless if you're paying that person or not. Okay. So, for example, some people, there's all kinds of buddy programs. When I used to work, and we talked about this with one of our previous guests about how I used to work at Bally Total Fitness. And one of the ways that we would have folks come into the gym is with what's called buddy referrals, right? So you could bring your friend into the gym. They could try it out. Maybe they would sign up, right? And if the gym wants to be successful, they would have commission with that. But there's tons of studies that will tell you that if you have somebody that is expecting you to be there, you are more likely to show up even if you don't want to. So having somebody who's an accountability partner, preferably somebody that you have a close relationship with, seems to be the thing. Because, right, usually the thing I tell my students is, right, when you love your students, you get to demand the best from them. When you're married and you have a significant other, they love you, so they get to demand the best from you, right? Even if you're not, they get to hold you in check, so to speak, right? So I think accountability partners are helpful. For me, to answer Nick's question, I like the structure, but I really don't focus so much on someone else extrinsically trying to get me to do it and like hold me accountable. Like, if you don't do this, this is the consequence. I really look for an accountability partner that, like, I've trained Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've brought this up multiple podcasts now. The person who manages the gym is a personal friend of mine, right? Didn't start out as a personal friend of mine. But literally, if I miss 2 days in a row, I get a text message, just a random hello, and hey, you training tonight? So that gets me always back into the gym, to the next class session, right? Because, those types of like habitual, make sure that I don't miss 2 days. I try to follow something called a 2-day rule, which is no more than 2 days in a row off, if I can help it. Doesn't always work out that way, but at least that's something I try to focus on.
Yeah.
For me. A couple other things that Roberta brought up that I think is worth discussing. I think it's really rare to find somebody that knows the difference between activity and exercise. A lot of people just like throw it into the big pot and just assume, oh, it's all the same. So, right, like we talk about this, like habitual physical activity is all about the habit of being active, right? It's part of your daily routine versus exercise is very prescribed, programmatic, outcome driven. We want to improve the 1 repetition max on a weight. There's a specific program that will help you get there. We don't just like, come into this room with no lights on and just hope we're going to hit the bullseye, right? We have to sort of know that we're walking on the most linear path towards that goal. So that's what a lot of exercise testing and prescription does, a course that I offer in the health sciences. The other thing that I just quickly wanted to talk about is you brought up that when 2010, you're on this weight loss program that was supervised by a physician. So was this physician like somebody like sometimes these are done by there's like bariatric doctors that will oversee it. Some of them are just lifestyle health and wellness coaches. Some of them are just general practitioners that you might have a family relationship with. Who was that person, and do you think weighing yourself every day was a good thing?
So the gentleman was actually, he was an emergency room physician, and he actually, I think he went to Jefferson.
Oh, wow.
So, and then he moved to Florida, and he was practicing down there, and he was really into weight loss. So he actually left the emergency room and started his own company. So they had other people, but I know people had talked to him. So I don't know if he was still practicing other places, but this was a thing he started. So that was him. The thing that I really loved about having a physician do this is that, when I got my diagnosis of thyroid cancer, he's like, these are the questions you need to ask. Send me your labs, da-da-da-da-da. So it was kind of having a concierge doctor, but he didn't replace my own physician, like my own family doctor or anything like that. He just kind of gave me some background knowledge. So I know that there are doctors out there that do this, but I don't feel like the relationship that I had with Michael was the same kind of relationship that you would have with just a doctor that you use your insurance to go pay and all that sort of thing. So it was a little bit different.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Oh, and the weighing yourself every day.
Yes.
Absolutely the best thing I ever did.
You think so?
Yes, because here's the thing. Like, think about a person when they go to get on a scale for a doctor's appointment or something like that, right? A lot of times you see them taking off as much as possible. Keys, shoes, coats, bags, whatever. They're like, I need to weigh the least amount that I possibly weigh.
Yeah.
I could tell you every single day what my weight was to the 10th, right? Every day. And I didn't care. Like, I still am, even though I gained a significant amount back. I don't care. Like, I go to the doctors. I don't take my shoes off. I just get on the thing. The scale is not, it is one tool to measure.
Yes.
That is it. So do I still weigh myself every day? I do not. But it's a check-in for me. But back then, it was something that really worked a lot.
Yeah, I think that's interesting that you brought that up because our last guest, we came to the conclusion of the opposite of that was, at least for people like myself who I think certain people might be susceptible to become obsessive about that number. And I think that might lead to unhealthy habits or goals, considering a lot of exercise would be weight bearing, and then your body composition is changing during that time as well. And that could, that the number doesn't necessarily indicate, if that is of fat or what, Well,
you're right. And one of the questions, Michael would ask me was, how did you sleep last night? Because we all know sleep and weight loss they go hand in hand. It was, he asked about other, things that were going on in my life, how much stress is there. So I knew, as long as there was like a downward trend, it wasn't, it was helpful to see, well, I ate this last night and it was a little bit higher this morning, but what was in there? And it was those types of things. It wasn't about like obsession with what the number on the scale was.
Got it.
So it was more of like a measure, right? It was just another piece of data.
It sounds almost analogous to kind of when someone counts calories. It sounds like you're kind of almost in a way training to get into that mode of understanding what could be affecting your weight rather than actually just focusing on your weight.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That sounds very insightful.
I mean, the rules that he had were those two, I said. But, the other thing was he was very particular, and this is kind of where we started having a little bit of an issue. He was very particular about these are the things that you could eat for breakfast, these are the things you could eat for lunch, and these are the things that you should eat for dinner.
Yeah.
And part of those things were like lean cuisines or something like that. And initially, it was fine because it's portion control, it's whatever. I'd have one of those and I'd have a nice big salad with it and be done, right? And then my husband and I got into the point where we were only eating like salads for dinner. And I still do that now because I don't like to have a big dinner.
You bring up something else, though. So that happens very commonly. So sometimes, like, I have nothing but the utmost respect for physicians, right? I almost became one. But I will tell you this, right? Because there's a lot of reasons I took the MCAT, a lot of reasons why I decided not to pursue it. Like, I really looked at work-life balance down the line, and if I'm on vacation, do I really want to be getting phone calls in the middle of the night, all kind, so you don't really deal with that as much on the PhD track. But a lot of physicians don't get very much nutrition education, believe it or not. And so this is something that some of my colleagues and nutrition scientists talk a lot about, specifically those that are registered dietitians, is that, there needs to be more referrals to registered dietitians to make sure, like, all right, well, maybe not lean cuisines and salads, like you can eat what you want. We just have to, little things like that. And so, but from an entity perspective, I feel like there's a level of credibility when you're working under the care of a medical doctor. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you feel like that is typically in our society, that is the pinnacle of medicine.
Right.
Right. And of just really all knowledge about how to make yourself healthier.
Right. Well, and we can talk about that because how I was back then and how I am right now with doctors, completely night and day.
Yeah.
But back to your point, this is where he and I started butting heads because I have cancer. I was being treated for cancer, and I no longer wanted to put that crap in my body.
Yeah.
So he said, listen, your weight is going up a little bit. Let's make it easy so that you don't have to focus or juggle these 10 or 15 things that you're having to do. It's more mindless, right? And I said, I understand what you're thinking or saying, but at some point, I'm going to have to say, I'm this age, I have these conditions, and I can't afford to eat garbage.
Yeah, exactly. I think I can rant about my own stories of how I had met it with doctors who kind of approach that from more allopathic and just numbers based. Yeah, for sure. But I think I think it's important to nutrition, super, and then it's more than just the number of what calories on the back of the box, right?
Right.
Eating those whole foods. I can't wait until we get that nutritionist on board. Onto the podcast too.
Sure. Which one?
The one that you were mentioning.
Oh, Nairi.
Yeah.
Nairi's Dardarian's a registered dietitian. She's sports nutritionist for the Philadelphia Flyers and the Union. She'd be terrific as well. But yeah, so she, is a very big advocate of it. Dr. Nasser, Jen Nasser, actually goes so far as to, in the past, has provided nutrition education for students in the College of Medicine, so they have that information. Just so much to learn, and Nick, is someone who has recently taken the MCATs. Right?
Yeah, I just got my scores back.
So, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, I think it's good that, you have the perspective of, I got to consider this in terms of how I treat people, right? Nutrition and healthy lifestyle, and but there's so much content that I understand that students that are going through medical school programs have to get, that there's just not enough time to pack everything that there is to know about being a doctor and having, say, a 16-week course in nutrition. Sometimes there's no courses. Usually it's a couple of lectures, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, and one of the things that I think people, and this is something I've really kind of delved a lot into, is food as medicine. So you say exercise is medicine, but so is food.
Sure.
So you figure, what do you put into your body? And if you put garbage in, you're going to get garbage out.
100%.
So those are the types of things too. So I'm back to struggling with my weight, and even more so without having a thyroid, and also trying to get your thyroid medication, so it's the right balance is really tough. But I think, looking at your body in a functional way and, and pursuing functional medicine where you don't necessarily just say, oh, I'm going to write a prescription for this pill and it'll be fine. Like, that's not, I'm not stupid enough to think that that's the only, I'm only going to eat healthy food and that is going to be the end of me. I will never have another illness. I will never need another medication.
Yeah.
But it's like, give your body a chance. And so you think about the obesity epidemic in this country, you think about all of the garbage food that we're eating and how the production of that food is really not doing anything for the environment. So you have to think about all those things too. And unfortunately, I don't think doctors, your Western medicine types really care about that because they know that there's prescriptions that they can write.
Oh man, I would love to get into this. Maybe we could say I definitely save this for after the podcast for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So what are you doing now for exercise, and what do you think it's doing to benefit you? Do you feel like it's giving good benefit, or could it be better? Or?
Well, it definitely could be better. So here's also, I have my back is a hot mess. I've got a lot of stenosis. I've got a little scoliosis in there. I've got a lot of compression. So I had injections about 4 or 5 years ago, and they worked really well for about 3 years, the epidural steroid injections. And so I kind of was able to get back into the exercise.
Yeah.
But I also feel like the thyroid is responsible for a lot of things that people just don't get.
Yeah.
And body and bones and all that stuff. So I'm back suffering with back issues again. I had a really cool procedure. It's a radio frequency ablation, and they call it a neurotomy. It's very cool. And they kind of burns the nerves in, I think it was like the L5-S1 that were really compressed. And so that helped. And I was like, well, now I don't have that horrible pain down my leg. But then it also said, oh, well, here are the other places you have pain. So going back to, I'm sorry, I'm very long-winded.
Okay.
That's perfect. That's for the podcast.
That's what
right.
we
We
want.
love to hear.
What I'm doing currently was right before Christmas, I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm sitting in my chair at my house all the time. I'm not getting activity. My back hurts, my knees hurt, the whole bit. So I went and joined RY, which is close. It's pretty close. And when I went up to do that, I noticed that there was a physical therapy group that sees patients at the Y, right?
Oh, that's so cool.
Right. So I thought, well, this will be good. And I started seeing them, and I said, listen, I need you to get me back into this. I need you to teach me how to do things that I'm not going to hurt myself, and then we'll just go. So unfortunately, with the pain being up and down all the time, I could have a really great session with the physical therapist, and then I'm out of commission for 2 days.
Yeah.
And it's just, so I'm scheduled to get injections again on this Friday. So we'll see if that works, and then I can get back into it. But I'm not enjoying exercise right now at all.
Not enjoying it.
No.
Mostly aerobic. Have you been doing, or resistance training, flexibility, yoga?
It's flexibility. It's definitely resistance.
Yeah.
Eventually, we got to get to the core stuff so that, it can support my back better, all those things. But, I also know that, if possible, dropping some weight will definitely help with the knees for sure. So we'll see. But I want to get back to it. I walk by the pool every day when I go into the gym, and I was like, oh. But then, thinking about like, oh, God, but it's cold.
It's not a heated pool?
It is, but it's cold outside.
Oh, I see.
But I will say, swimming is one of the best things you can do for your back.
Yeah.
Very low impact, right?
Yeah.
A total body, yeah.
Yeah.
Total body workout. You seem to enjoy it, right? I'm going back to the shore.
Yeah.
Right?
I love water.
Way back to
Love
the
it.
shore, right? How you became physically active in the first place.
Yeah.
And so sometimes, like, there is the big part of that, too, I think, when it comes to overcoming the resistance to exercising in the first place. It's sort of this target that people know they should do, could do, but don't do. because they don't want to necessarily, or they want to, but they don't have the education on, well, how do I lift the weight? How do I adjust the seat?
Yeah.
And so like that's really what we're trying to do, not only with the podcast, but also with other content that we've been producing, is to really try and like break down all the barriers. Like, for example, if somebody, let's say, whose goal was for weight loss, right? Well, where does that number come from? Like, okay, how much weight you want to lose, right? At one point, you hit an amazing goal, 80 pounds, right?
Yeah.
So, like, how do we get to that number, right? And so there are actually target formulas that we can use to develop based off of a person, how much a person weighs, and you figure out, well, how much of that weight is muscle, how much of that weight is fat, and then according to large-scale population studies, things like NHANES, you can see, well, what is the right amount of body fat, total body fat, so not gut fat versus skin fat, et cetera. And so then the target becomes, well, let's say we're at 28% and we want to get to 15 or 16, right? Well, using these formulas, which we have developed we use it as an exercise in exercise testing and prescription for some of the case studies that we do, but we also last year helped give all students in the entire Drexel community a fresh check day in May. They had it was like the first event they had back where after COVID outside, and we did bioelectrical impedance scans for every single student, figured out the body fat percentage, compared it to where they thought they wanted to be, and it converts it into your weight today to what the weight would be at that percent body fat, and that's the target.
Yeah.
Now the target becomes, well, now I know the number that I need to more prescriptively get to my goal, but then how do I get there, right? And a lot of people, like my mother was someone who lost over 100 pounds, right? Did Weight Watchers under the direct care of Dr. Paul Thompson. He's a cardiologist, really well known up in Hartford, and he's a cholesterol management doctor. But my mother was having issues with cholesterol. When she lost weight, her cholesterol improved. So what ended up happening is, right, well, my mother's a type of person who likes to exercise from 0 to 7 days, goes from nothing to 7 days, and then cuts back drastically on the calories. So there's a lot of early wins, but a lot of it's water weight.
Yeah.
So what we really try to say is, well, here's the number. If you cut back 250 calories a day over the course of a week, and you exercise 250 calories more a day, that's going to get you 500 calories a day in deficit times 7 days is 3,500 calories, which happens to be 1 pound of fat.
Right.
So on that timeline, it builds in a lot of ebbs and flows into the program, as opposed to crash dieting or sometimes when I worked in the fitness industry. Not necessarily the rehab industry, I did that too, but it was always about how much weight you want to lose, and the person would say, I don't know, 100 pounds. Well, I don't know where that number came from. Like maybe 40 gets them to where they want to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of other factors. But if it's okay, we also had an email exchange in the fall.
Yes.
You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure.
Which was we published a paper where one of my students in my CEP lab. And it was based off of this phenomena that there are appetite hormones that are secreted from our gut, our adipose tissue, and other organs that ultimately regulate whether we want to eat or not eat. Okay. But some of the terminology that was used in that abstract and subsequently a lot of the obesity literature compares normal weight people to obese people or to overweight people or to morbidly obese people. They put people in sort of these buckets.
Right.
And so you want to talk a little bit about that exchange? I'm happy to
Sure.
have the dialogue and
Sure.
and talk a little bit about some of these issues.
Yeah. So I am now on the board of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion. So these types of things are becoming more I'm becoming more aware of these types of things. So it was just a random thing that I saw the name of this as normal weight compared to, obese people. And I came back at Dr. Bruno and I said, so why are we saying normal weight? And who's to say what normal is?
Yeah.
Right? And then I'm looking at it from, and one of the things I said to him was, if this paper gets out there, let's say, it's got this amazing information that is going to end up to the public, right? The media will pick up on the title of that saying obese people to normal weight people. And then you think, well, as a person who's not quote unquote normal, what is that going to do to my psyche and my willingness to want to do something about it?
Yeah.
So it's another place where people are othered, right? So you are othered in that particular case. So I said to Dr. Bruno, I was like, well, why can't we change that or something else, right? So that you're not saying normal weight and all that. So, and then we had, he was filling me in on, a lot of the terminology and then his efforts to maybe try and change that. So that was what a thing. Because if you feel put in a bucket some way and you feel like you have to fight your way out of that bucket.
Yeah, you want to be part of the team.
Right.
Yeah, you want to be part of the team of everyone exercising. What conclusion did you guys come to the terminology?
So ultimately, this is speaking, I believe, to just for people that are listening. This is speaking towards the fact that most of the body weight guidelines, if it's based, there's different ways to establish people based off of body weight guidelines, right? Most of the information from a body fat percentage, how much of your total weight is fat weight, were largely done by the Cooper Institute in Dallas, Texas during the 1970s and early 80s. So that a lot of these norms are 40 plus years old at this point. So that's number one. Number two is that the World Health Organization's guidelines for body weight classification simply looks at BMI. Okay, and that is person's weight in kilograms divided by their height in meters squared. So example, somebody that's a professional athlete with very low body fat percentage, LeBron James has a BMI like 48. He's morbidly obese according to World Health Organization guidelines. And so really this conversation that Roberta and I had via email was really about what is normal, how do we bridge the gap between these current terms and really how do we get it to a place where it's more we don't stigmatize people, right?
Well, especially I think in our Western society where majority of people are overweight now. So that's not, so it would be almost abnormal to be a quote unquote healthy body weight, right?
Yeah, and there's been discussions about how are we going to deal with this overweight and obesity problem in terms of the fact that high percentage of people are in that category. 2/3 of people are either overweight or obese. 1/3 of people are obese, BMI over 30. And so some have actually thought that maybe they're just going to move the bench post from 25 and they're going to move it back closer to 30, and then a lot of people are by default that are between 18 and 20 might fall within this new normal weight criteria.
But that's not a good thing to do.
Well, right. what I think is funny was if you calculated so I weigh 225. I'm 5'10" on a good day. I'm 5'9". But
225.
225, yeah. So I'm definitely over 30 BMI. Also, during Mike's exercise testing and prescription class that I was in earlier this term, we did something called a DEXA.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. I don't know exactly what the acronym. It's basically an X-ray that determines your body composition and what is fat and what is fat-free mass. And it was verified with both skin fold calipers and biological impedance. I'm 30% body fat. Would you feel? I looked at that. I got the DEXA. I'm like, clearly there's something wrong here, right? I don't feel like I'm 30% body fat.
Right. And
then I got the BIA, and then I got the skin fold calipers, and then they both verified within like 1% of each other. And I thought, I feel like I am not morbidly obese, but by the standards of both this percentage and BMI, I am. And I feel like that we have to start looking a more subjective view of these different types of body compositions, because I do primarily a lot of powerlifting.
Yeah.
So I think my stature is a little bit different. I have a little bit more gynoid distribution as well, which is typically a little bit healthier than the android. So I feel healthy. I feel like I look good. I feel very good about myself. But those numbers make me feel very self-conscious.
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely. And like there are cut points. Like once people have a BMI over 30, it's like that's considered class 1, and then over 35 is class 2, and over 40 is class 3, right?
Yeah.
But so one of the things that I was really trying to just grapple with was, okay, like at the end of the day, why, and I thought about this, why do people think that being overweight and obese is such a problem? Like what is like the clinical relevance of how we got here, right? And it's large scale, big study, epidemiology studies where there's correlations between higher BMI and premature death or cardiovascular disease, cancers, all these things, right? So I really said to myself, well, that's correlational in nature, but if we look at this from what characteristics, aside from just weight, predispose somebody to the risk, right? And so the classification system really needs to think more broadly about not just weight. It really needs to think more broadly about, well, what components of weight, what things typically associate with certain compositions that put people at risk. And as an example of that, we know that visceral adipose tissue, the adipose tissue that surrounds a lot of our vital organs, that can be easily measured with like a waist circumference measurement, and higher central obesity in the gut tends to associate with more risk, right? So I understand that. So what I have been doing for the last 3 years now has been going back to NHANES data with tens of thousands of people in it, with some of the students in the lab, and we're updating the body weight classification guidelines. So that way it accounts for more than just weight in kilograms to height in meters squared. And it's coming up with odds and risk ratios. So how does 1 centimeter increase in waist circumference or 1 inch increase in waist circumference, how does that translate to risk? Right? And so really it's based off of risk, not just assuming, that's the key word there, not just assuming that people who have a higher BMI are automatically going to be unhealthy. And that is kind of like what we're trying to get at, is it includes for things, first off, it includes for things like total body composition, visceral adipose tissue. There's DEXA scans for every single person. It accounts for waist circumference measures. And then, oh, by the way, it stratifies it by age, sex, and race across the lifespan. So 18 upwards of, I think some of the samples have 80 years of age and older participants. So it sort of shows that the norms for one cohort, you can't just like lump everybody together, because there's a lot of variability between that. And this really comes, the reason why I was like, well, why even go through this in the first place, right? Like maybe medicine, the reason is because most of the classification schemes that exist aren't listed as normal / healthy weight, overweight, obese, right? Some of them are like superior, very good, good, fair, poor, very poor. And so like, how do you know, like, is good overweight, is good, like, how do we so we figured out how to standardize all this stuff, so that way a risk ratio score can be generated, such that if you go to your doctor and you have a BMI over 30, the first order of business is going to be, well, we're also going to do a waist circumference, or we'll have somebody do a skin fold on you, or we'll do some other way of figuring out your real risk and coming up with these risk scores that ultimately determine the people who are at risk, not just assuming that because a person has a BMI over 30 that they're automatically by default at risk. Right. And that's, I think, that would be a step in the right direction.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because so I have high cholesterol, and it wasn't always high, but it is high now. And then I also found out that, back to the thyroid, my endocrinologist said, I can optimize you for lifestyle, quality of life, cholesterol, or disease, right? So I was like, thank you, I'll go with quality of life.
Yeah.
So I noticed that when my TSH goes up, my cholesterol goes up, and significantly, not just a little bit, but a lot. So I've been working with a cardiologist, and when I went in to see him the first time, he's like, wow, this is very complex. There's a lot to do here.
Yeah.
So I said, I want to get my cholesterol under control. So he said, well, I'm not in a position, I'm not at the point where I think we should put you on a statin. He said, there's other things I want to do first.
Yeah.
So he had me do with Boston Heart, this very extensive blood draw and, panel. And what it came back was saying was that I'm a cholesterol producer, not an absorber. So that's a little bit different.
Interesting.
And then he said, all right, well, we know that, but I'm still not convinced. He said, let's do one more thing. Let's do a cardiac calcium scan, right? So guess what my scan was?
What was it?
What?
0.
Really?
0. Yeah.
Wow.
So this is to your point over here. It's like you look at me as a person on paper. Am I unhealthy? I don't know, maybe. What are my organs telling me? Is my gut healthy? And more importantly, how do I feel? Right? So if I can get my cholesterol under control, great, right? I'm doing more of a Mediterranean diet for that and all that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, it's how do I feel? And going back to one thing that you said, Mike, was that, when you walk into a doctor's office, and this goes back to what we were all talking about medicine, you walk into a doctor's office, the implicit bias is, here's a fat person, they must be eating too much, they must be doing this and that and the other thing, right? Mm-hmm. So then their only prescription is lose weight. Or they'll say, your thyroid's not working, let's put you on hormone. You have, your A1C is too high, let's put you on Ozempic or something like that. So these are the types of things they're doing. They're not necessarily saying, I'm going to write you a prescription to go exercise and to see a nutritionist and eat these things. That's not how it goes.
I think it's a little reductionist, the approach to see that, someone's overweight, that they're unhealthy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because I served with people in the military, and they were running laps around me, and they were visually overweight, but they were probably the pinnacle of at least athleticism, I'd say.
Right.
Stuff like that.
Sure.
And this might be a hot topic, so we don't have to get too much into it if you don't want to. But I really like how you brought up quality of life. And I think, and this is generally how I would hope to approach medicine in the future, is, humans aren't meant to live forever, right? We typically have all these norms and things, and right, but we break down eventually, right? And I think it's what is going to give you the best quality of life for the amount your calories, right? So I think there comes a point to where it's like pick and choose your battles, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think you have to look. I say this all the time in my classes. There is no such thing as an apparently healthy adult that has no medical history or problems. Like, the person doesn't exist. It's a unicorn, right? It doesn't exist, right? Yeah. So we really need to think, well, does this person have risk factors that are concerning today? Are they going to pose an emergent threat in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years? Or in the next 20 to 30 years, right? And so the way you approach that is really in the long game, right? So some people, for example, Roberta, you brought up something that I know a lot about, which is cholesterol, right? And so you're a cholesterol producer. So there's different, if you look at cholesterol, some of it is, high density or low density lipoprotein cholesterol. So if somebody has a kind of cholesterol that is very dense, right? Well, that might cause more damage compared to somebody who has cholesterol that's more foam-like, right, where it just floats past.
Yeah, you mentioned that
right?
in one of your classes. Yeah.
Yeah, and so like the reason is like, well, okay, well, why does the person have high cholesterol, right? Let's start there, right? Like maybe the diet, but it's largely genetic. And so usually, it's funny, like this is a preface for what I'll be talking about in class today, but really there's an LDL receptor problem, right? There's an LDL production problem. So typically, most cardiologists or docs will give something called an HMG-CoA reductase inhibitor, a statin, right? And the goal is to stop the cholesterol production from inside the hepatocyte of the liver, right? So if there's too much cholesterol in the blood, so let's shut it off in the liver or diminish it significantly. Well, then inside of the hepatocyte, cholesterol levels drop, which means what? Let's take more from the blood and bring it in. So the reason why cholesterol medications work, and if there is one drug, Paul Thompson will say this, other cardiologists that I've worked with have said this, is that at the end of the day, what you will see happens is that people who take a statin, they just live longer in life, and their risk for having a cardiac issue in 5 years or less, particularly if they already have known cardiac disease, goes down substantially. So one of the things that a lot of people forget, and this is why, like you said it beautifully, Roberta, a few minutes ago, is ACSM and ACSM's National Mission for Exercises Medicine, and us at Drexel as an Exercises Medicine campus. The goal is to get all doctors, including people at the Student Health Services Center that treat people on campus, to do exactly what you're talking about. Give them a physical activity and exercise prescription to fix a lot of their issues. And maybe they can't fix all of it, but for example, with the outcome of cholesterol, typically resistance training, weight training, clanging and banging training, as The Rock would say, is going to typically lower your cholesterol 6 to 9 milligrams per deciliter, LDL cholesterol. And so, diet is also part of that. Diet will work more favorably in terms of moving the whole panel forward. Mm-hmm. But exercise as a treatment will definitely work as a component of that healthy lifestyle.
Yeah. I like how you brought up how important nutrition is. Substantially, right? But I think it was like in our first episode, Mike and I were talking about how we personally feel that exercise and acts of commission are a lot easier to implement in your lifestyle than to slowly take those things away. At least from our perspective. I'd say it's a lot easier to just start, throwing in a workout, right? And then you can adjust your diet later on. Obviously, there's no substitute for a poor diet, right?
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah, and some of the things too, in terms of like, I'm definitely not an expert in behavior change, but I do read books like Atomic Habits by James Clear and other books. Yeah. So Roberta knows, Nick, that I have a lot of book recommendations.
I love to see your library.
Yeah,
a lot.
But like, all about like accountability partner. That's a James Clear line. But really, he talks about this as like the idea of doing something like habit stacking.
Yeah,
this is an idea too that is as a tactic, which is like, all right, well. So I mentor a student in the Macy undergraduate program here in the college, right? Mm-hmm. And she's like, I'd love to exercise, but I don't have any time. I got some family stuff going on. And so really, I'm like, all right, well, let's figure out how to get it done. And so she's like, well, if I go to the gym after work, then I'll go. But I haven't been going in the last 2 weeks. And I'm like, all right, well, you have to stage things. So, like, literally pack your bag and put the bag in the car the night before.
Yeah, people, like, leave their running shoes out by their front doors in the morning so that they know to go run.
So that trigger, right? So, like, this is the reason why people that forget to floss at night, James Clear will say, you put the floss out somewhere that you're going to go, right? Like you brush your teeth at night, just don't leave the floss in the drawer. Don't leave the floss in the vanity cabinet. Leave it right there in the cup so that way you see it. And then you associate brushing your teeth with flossing. And over time, it just starts to become easier and easier to do.
Yeah. For instance, like I would never stretch, but then always during my conditioning days, I bring my foam roller with me and, do some yoga and stuff.
Yeah. I get what you're saying, right? But you also, there is the behavioral part, but there's the mental health part, right? And so I'm a person where I could have all of the best intentions and I could even have habits built, right? And you're accountability person. But it's very simple. If it's not a priority to me or whomever, then it's not going to happen. You're always going to find a reason why you shouldn't do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's safe to say that we are, again, talking about those quality of life, right? And then hopefully what would be delayed gratification. Like if you're exercising and you are just completely miserable the entire time, regardless of the effect, then, maybe you're exercising wrong. You shouldn't be doing that. It's like whatever at the end of the day makes you live longer, but happier and healthier too, right? We don't want someone living to 300 years old who's just going to be absolutely miserable for 200 years,
It's true.
Yeah.
No, it's true. And I think you bring up a good point, Roberta, about that. And it's really about it. These are tools and tactics to eliminate the friction of doing things.
Sure.
Right? But if there's no desire, we have to think about what is the why that I want to do this. So in multiple podcasts, we've talked about like the reasons why people do and don't exercise and like how to overcome them. But like, what's the why? What's the meaning? And one thing that we see in some, I attended a behavior change conference in the fall virtually, and really what it was talking about is how sometimes presenting data in reverse. So for example, we've talked about like, okay, where you are today is going to put you at risk 30 years from now, right?
Yeah.
Versus doing it backwards, which is like, there was a study about exercise for chronic kidney disease patients, so people that require dialysis 3 days per week. And when you put the number from this hypothetical future number that we're not quite sure it's going to be into, on average, people who are with this condition at this particular time right now, you only have, the average person, not saying this is going to be you, but the average person is only going to be around for another 15 to 16 years. All of a sudden, it's like, I only have 15, 16 years left. Sometimes that turns the switch on.
Yeah.
And people start getting their priorities. Like, I want to be at, my child's wedding or whatever happens to be. And that becomes their why, and it becomes bigger.
I remember you brought that up during class one time where we were going over this case study, and the patient would be like, why would I want to do this? And not only to promote your ADLs or activities of daily living, but like, hey, I want to pick up my grandkids. You know what I mean? I want to hold them. And these exercises will help with that. So it's like, what do you want in the long run,
Right. Well, and it was funny because the physical therapist said to me, what is a goal for you? And usually it's like, oh, I want this, I want that. And I said, you know what? I'd like to be able to get up off the floor.
Yeah.
Like, I want to be able to kneel down and get up off the floor. And like, my biggest fear right now is falling, because if I fell, it's gonna hurt me, my back, it's gonna mess up my knees.
Yeah.
And so I never had a goal like that before. And it's kind of embarrassing to be like, well, I'm 54 years old, right? And I shouldn't be worried about falling and not being able to get up. So I think, the goal, like you were saying, my goal isn't necessarily to lose weight right now. That's not my goal. My goal is to not be in pain, and my goal is to feel better, right? So I think when you look at those types of things, how can that happen? And I guess going back to like a physician, they're not going to ask you that. What goal do you want to have this, for your...
Typically, I think, or in traditional sense, probably not.
Right, because people are just going to assume, oh, they want this. Like, they want to be normal weight. They want to have blah, blah, blah. But there's so much involved in this. You got to think about food, and you got to think about mental health. I'm telling you, I could go for
yes, right after this.
A long time talking about this stuff.
You want to know something, though?
What?
If you can just make one decision to choose to exercise every day, this is another Paul Thompson quote. Paul Thompson is a mentor of mine. He's renowned cardiologist at Hartford Healthcare, recently retired. He doesn't worry about the diet and all that other stuff. He tells his patients, if you could just make one decision, you don't have to worry about making 30 decisions about exercise, right? Or not exercise, about what I'm going to eat. Should I have this snack? Should I not have this snack? That one thing, really it is. Exercise truly is medicine. It is the panacea. The one thing that if people just do, a lot of health problems, from mental health issues we see improve with it, to physical, to emotional health. There's so much. Just doing one thing.
It was the previous director of the CDC said it was, if you could bottle up the most perfect pill in the world, it would be exercise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's free. It's cost effective.
Right. Yeah.
People really want
but
it.
what you were saying too is that exercise is not going to fix a crappy diet.
Right.
No,
Right.
but it's going to fix a lot of other things for sure.
That's true.
Like, for example, somebody who struggles with, someone who is, let's say, type 2 diabetic, right? They live with person who lives with diabetes. Doing the exercise once at least every 48 hours, every other day, improves your insulin sensitivity. So, some of the diabetic complications that can occur, we don't see them having nearly as an effect. And sometimes people who do it as pre-diabetics, they slow the progression to full-blown diabetes, and they can keep it away for longer, right? And so that's what I try to tell people when I've done studies with patients who live with kidney disease, right? So stage 1 or stage 2, typically chronic kidney disease is really defined by your GFR, your glomerular filtration rate, right? How much blood your kidneys can process and filter out the waste products per minute. And once people get to stage 3, very few make it to stage 5, and some people say, well, why? And oftentimes people die of a heart attack or some other cardiac event before they ever make it to renal disease.
Yeah.
So the thinking is, well, we want to get away from just using that as not doing nothing, and we have to say, well, can we do something today that is going to take you a step in the right direction for lowering that risk and keeping you from needing dialysis treatment. And it works, that we see that lasts a lot longer. People can 2, 3, 4 years instead of it happening a year from, that's sort of the other things too, is like, even if it's not noticeably changing, even if it's keeping you at par, that's still a victory. And I think a lot of people, focus on the wrong targets. Like you said, some people focus just on the scale. Some people, I don't really ever look at the scale, ever, or hardly ever, because I go based off how I feel. Like to Nick's point about quality of life, like, do I have risk factors? Get a routine blood sample. What does that blood look like? Am I feeling well? Right? Am I overly anxious? Usually if I'm anxious about something, it usually means that I need to work out, and that fixes it. And I'll think about things a lot more clearly, level-headedly. As we're finishing up today, a couple other things I just want to sort of ask Roberta, and really they could probably combine into like one sort of like final segment, which would be, is there anything that you wanted to know from maybe Nick or myself about exercise, or any fads or diets? And now you wanted to talk about the watches, you said the wearables. Nick?
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure.
Any
fads or diets that any information that you sort of saw and want to know if there's any like muster behind it?
Well, I mean, I've done a lot of kind of investigation between like the keto and the paleo and all those types of things. And, thinking about, the Mediterranean diet, I guess. So as far as a fad is concerned, like I've never really kind of bought into those. It's just like more of your plate should be vegetables and fruit.
Yeah.
And less of your plate should be meat and grains. And it's funny, there's this one doctor I follow, and he calls meat condom meat. So it's only like a condiment. So it's like, just like this little tiny thing, and the rest of it is vegetables.
Gotcha.
I don't know. Okay. Well, yeah. Tell me, what would be a good way to, like, what resistance type of stuff could I be doing? And like, I'm losing muscle, I'm losing bone because of thyroid and other things. So what could I be doing?
I would say first order would be, I would have to look at your full workup, of course, but I would say some very easy, low stake stuff that I would say you could easily do is things like TheraBands. You know, you could buy those. You can do them right at home. You don't need not a gym. You could have them in the office if you want to take a break and do a couple.
What do you mean by TheraBand? Like the resistance ones?
Yeah.
Oh,
It's like giant rubber bands.
Different
yeah,
colored
we
bands.
have like a box. I didn't donate them yet, but I have a box of like 1,000.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
Maybe we can give one to Roberta.
Yeah,
I have them at home.
we definitely should bring them into the building.
Yeah, and so that would be probably, you know, resistance that is like low level resistance, right? You don't have to worry so much about form and technique because it's just a band, right? So it's not like there's all this weight. You know, you have to make sure you're breathing. You do have to breathe appropriately, but it's less important than if you had, like, say, 200 pounds on a squat rack or some other type of lift, where it's very important to prevent things like the Valsalva maneuver. So I would probably start there. I would probably make sure that some of the activity is seated to protect your back. Or maybe using something like a Bosu ball that you could sit on that works your core strength. I would probably start there and then collaborate with, you know, we have folks that are at the DAC who Nick and I have been building relationships with, and Nick gets a lot of the credit for making that happen, to really walk through and educate people on how to actually use each piece of equipment. And I think that orientation would be helpful. But then really thinking about, okay, well, how often should I be doing this? You know, should I do aerobic and resistance on the same day? Those types of decisions really depend on what the health and fitness goals are going to be.
Right.
But for resistance, I would say for you, the primary modality I would recommend would be something like a TheraBand. Combination of seated and standing around some of your back issues. I would start there.
Are you talking like high reps, less tension?
Depends.
Okay.
Depends on what the goal is, right?
Yeah.
So if your goal is I want to be able to walk around pain-free, I might go in an onboarding program starting off pretty light to just get you familiar with the neuro movement of it. But there are definitely, so when I heard what you just said about I'm losing some bone mass, more heavily resistive weight-bearing, load-bearing exercise like a squat rack safely, you have to figure it out. There are activities where load-bearing exercise will absolutely help you with your bone turnover, such that the osteoblast in the building bones, you know, at least compete with the resorbing bone. Because right now what's happening, the reason why we're losing bone is it's resorbing faster than it's building. And so it's a net deficit, which is why the bones become weaker.
Okay.
That's what I would probably say. Nick, anything to add to that?
Oh man, I feel like the more I learn about exercise, I have my one neighbor. She is getting into exercise, and she keeps asking me these questions, and I feel like they're getting more difficult the more educated I'm getting. I'm like, all right, to answer that question, I need to ask you 10 more. So yeah, I mean, ideally, I'm a big advocate on total body like compound movements, not necessarily like super heavy weight. It depends like what your goals are, but ideally, like I would love my patient or whoever's, you know, wanting to work towards something to be able to do a squat and to be able to do a push-up and to, you know, be able to do those things. And I feel like those two exercises typically, I think, would hit the majority of your muscles in your body, you know, personally.
Gotcha.
But I don't want to have like an 80-minute rant about it. But yeah,
Sure.
definitely I would say, to be safe, work with your healthcare provider or physical therapist. Ask them questions. How can I work towards this? And hopefully they would be able to help you with that kind of stuff.
And make sure they have the right credentials too. That's
Yes.
important.
Yeah, at
There's
least
a lot of you can't work in the barrier to work in the fitness industry is pretty low, but make sure that you're working with a
I mean,
person
these are DPTs.
DPTs. I know that. I mean, but like
That checks
personal
out.
trainers and you know what I mean. Like some personal training certifications are like weekend, no trainer.
Yeah,
Right.
Saturday
yeah.
afternoon.
It's like
you're a
online
trainer.
reverend school, you know.
Yeah. And there are some of that, and so we're trying to fix some of that. ACSM's trying to fix some of that with their certifications. But all right, anything else that you have? Any parting words, Roberta, before we finish up for today, any advice you'd give to, say, the non-exerciser who's now listened to your story and is saying like, wow, I'm really inspired by her story and I can do this?
I guess think about the priority. Like, what is the priority for self-care? And what are you willing to do for that? You know, I meditate every day. That has been something that I will not pass up. It's easier to pass up, you know, like exercise is much easier for me to just forego. But I think if I really sat down and thought about like what is the priority and where does my own personal health fall into that? And then once you do that, you got to get over the hump of, you know, okay, it might be painful to get into the routine. And I don't mean pain like body, physical pain, but it's just like, you know, I got to get...
Arduous, yeah.
Yeah, and so once you can get over that, and what is it, like 21 days makes a habit, something like that?
Yeah, somewhere around that
Yeah.
point.
What does Paul Thompson say?
No, Paul Thompson doesn't say that. James Clear says that one. Somewhere in the vicinity of like you need 7 experiences. And six weeks.
So just kind of give it that, you know, like it's kind of like think about a pill. Like you got to titrate up to something.
Yeah.
It's like, so you got to try it for a week. I know with thyroid medication, the second they change it, 8 weeks later, I got to get a blood draw because they have to see what it's doing. So it's like you got to give it time in order to see if it's working. So there you go.
Priorities, right? Definitely important. Self-care. Love that you talked about meditation.
Absolutely.
We'll have to have you back on. We'll talk about
oh my gosh,
the
it's
spiritual
fantastic.
side of exercise.
We need a part 2 of this.
Part 2 with Roberta Perry will be required.
Yes.
Nick, any last minute words before we finish up for today?
No, great session. Thanks for coming, Roberta.
I appreciate having you guys have. At first, I was like, "What am I going to talk about?"
See, everyone's got their story.
Yeah. So
Everybody does. Well, thank you so much for coming in. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody.